Story 1. I do not want to see the same doctor as a homeless person. The thought had never crossed my mind, and the more I reflected on that statement, the more I realized that I would not want to see a doctor who refused to treat a homeless person. Story 2. I hate reading. Embrace yourself. After a second date with a man, we were in his car when the news came on. The leading story was about a takedown of an extensive pedophilia ring, which included high court judges, politicians, very wealthy, well-known people. You get the picture. This man was making impatient breathing sounds. Finally, he burst out and said angrily, "It's all nonsense." I, of course, thought he was angry about the existence of such groups. Like most people would be. Then he said, "It's absolute nonsense. Any man who says he has never thought about it is lying. It's just natural to feel that way. They shouldn't be making people out to be criminals like that." Story 3. A fellow culinary student said that due to karma from past lives, homeless people and anyone else in dire straits deserved it. Another student and I exchanged glances and thought, well, that friendship is over. Story 4. My ex broke up with me for being broke. I made a few dollars less than her per hour. I have a car, an apartment, a decent credit score, savings, and I pay all my bills on time. She was evicted, her car was repossessed, and she had nothing to her name, no car, and poor credit. She said she was just going through getting off medication, and her friends told her to break up with me because I was broke. And she did. I still don't understand it. She seemed to be living up to her friends' lifestyle of partying and drinking and traveling while she couldn't even take care of her own situation. But to criticize me for being broke? What the heck? I don't know why it hurt so badly, but it still stings. I tried so hard. Story 5. A coworker recently told me that poor is just a mindset, as if no poverty line exists and the cost of living is a real thing. Story 6. A coworker who is a minority told me not to trust my manager because she was Indian and everybody knows that they lie. I reported it. Story 7. Someone once seriously told me that the Earth is flat and that all space photos are part of a National Aeronautics and Space Administration conspiracy. First, I thought they were joking, but no. Story 8. My ex-best friend, after calling me weeping and confessing that she cheated on her girlfriend, with whom she had just gotten back together maybe 2 weeks before, told me, "I'm trying really hard to stop having intimate relationships with men who are in other relationships and helping them cheat. I'm trying so hard." This was after not trying hard to do anything of the sort and being a flagrant cheater herself. Story 9. Me. I know you don't agree with the COVID vaccination. That's fine. But would you please take a COVID test after getting off the airplane and before we catch up? I want to be able to see my terminally ill, immunocompromised mom, and I don't want to risk giving her COVID. My former best friend. No, because I don't want to get a sinus infection. Me. Please reconsider. I don't know how long my mom has. My former best friend. No, I won't be getting any COVID test. Last thing I ever communicated to her. Story 10. I can't wait for my dad to die so I can get his life insurance. My ex, whose dad is literally the nicest person ever. Story 11. I was a caregiver for my 95-year-old grandma with advanced dementia. She had a very traumatic, slow, and painful death. After she passed, I was in bed rereading old letters she had written to me from when she was still herself. My ex of 6 years, with whom I lived, came into the bedroom and pulled out my middle school diary, making fun of it to comfort me. Once he got to the parts about my suicide attempts at 12, he got the chills and closed it, saying, "Ugh, that's not funny. I don't want to read that," and left the room. I never felt more alone in that moment. He also said that if I wanted him to say nice things to me like, "You did such a great job of taking care of her," or "She was such a strong woman," then I should tell him what I wanted to hear. He claimed there was no difference between him saying it naturally and me telling him what to say. I told him I needed a break because I just needed him gone and I was so exhausted, and I asked him to leave. He cried for 3 days straight and did not drink or eat. Please keep in mind that not even a week prior, I listened to my grandma cry for 3 days because her organs were shutting down. Before that, I fed her. My ex refused to eat or drink, and I had to listen to him cry because he felt so bad. Yet, he decided to excitedly show me he shaved his pubic hair and expected me to be happy. He also expected me to be pleased when he said he would work on showering more. He was absolutely insane. Yes, I broke up with him. I needed him gone first because, as you've gathered by now, he was emotionally abusive. I mailed him all his things and didn't see him after that. The week before she died, he had asked me how I wanted him to support me. For example, whether I wanted space or to be held. The last thing I expected was for him to act like that, so please do not give me any hate. Story 12. I had an accounting teacher who seemed to be okay. He asked about my background, and I mentioned that my undergraduate degree was in economics. Well, that led to 30 minutes of a lecture about the Illuminati, Freemasonry, international jury, and the like. I applied to a different teacher and ended up dropping out of the program. Story 13. That carbon dating does not prove anything because Noah's flood rearranged the layers of the Earth's crust, throwing off the results. Story 14. A friend once told me, "You know the moon is fake. It was made by aliens to control the weather so they could live on Earth." I just stared at him, walked away, and decided I could not be friends with someone this foolish. Story 15. Someone told me not to take my medications together because they will not know which way to go. Someone told me that it was my duty to cook, clean, and have intimacy with my estranged spouse who walked out on our family. Someone told me that my divorce could not have happened the way I said because she never saw that happen on court television. As a police officer, I took a rape victim to the emergency room and was standing outside the bay. A white nurse told her that she did not believe her because nobody would want to rape a black woman. A former employee refused to use medications for her many sexually transmitted diseases because it required her to abstain for 2 weeks. Additionally, she would not use condoms, so she was spreading it around. A former neighbor took a chair in the lobby with the intention of breaking the picture window to our community room because the door was locked. I was able to wrestle it from him before he smashed the window and told him it would make more sense to go outside and walk through the porch door to unlock the door from the inside. I hear ridiculous things all the time. Story 16. I remember asking a friend of mine what he was thinking about while he was looking out of the bus window. He instantly turned around to me and became very defensive, making a big show out of just how weird it was that I asked him that. I never spoke to him again after that day. Story 17. My mother-in-law told my husband that she thinks abortion rights are state rights 2 weeks after I had a miscarriage in a conservative state. Have you ever had to look up what was legal rather than medically recommended for your health? I did, and it's not fun. I technically had an abortion, which she knew because my husband called to tell her the news from the pharmacy. I didn't realize she cared so little about me that she was okay with politics and not doctors dictating my health. She is confused as to why we are not really responding to her text messages or calls. Story 18. One of my previous bosses released a new plan on how to change the department and make it work better. He tells us he always wants to hear feedback from us. Nearly everyone knew it was a bad idea and was upset. I talked to him after he was done, said let me get my thoughts together over the weekend, which was Friday, and I will bring it to you on Monday. I also was not happy. Monday comes, and I am trying to explain to him why things will not work and what is needed. He stops me mid-meeting and says, "It does not matter what you have to say." Right there, and then I lost all respect for him. I said, "Oh, okay. That is how it is going to be? Guess we are done here." Story 19. When my brother, the Catholic, stated, "I am very well informed on the debate around abortion," followed by fully disavowing that even a single woman has been harmed by pro-life legislation in the States, I felt frustrated. He implied that we cannot give you medical care because that might make us lose our license, as what you need might be or cause an abortion. I haven't spoken to him since. There are plenty of well-documented cases, including women being left to die. I mean, it's not like I had much respect for him before he said that, but don't tell me you are well-informed, then follow it with a deep display of ignorance if you want me to care about what you have to say. Story 20. I think it was 2005 and I was up supporting a warfighter exercise somewhere. Warfighter is an important exercise for brigades about to deploy to test their staffs. The exercise hadn't started yet. We were still getting the introductions and ground rules briefings. So we all filed into the post-movie theater to hear from the senior mentor. The senior mentor was a retired general who was supposed to pair up with the deploying unit's commander and provide high-level guidance from his vast experience. So the mentor says, "We are winning in Iraq. I do not know if you remember, but in 2005 we were losing 5 or 6 service members a day, and it looked like anything but winning." If he had said, "We are absolutely getting our backsides handed to us," or "Holy smokes, we are sending you into the jaws of hell, but we are counting on you to fix it," I would have had some respect for him. Winning? No thank you. Story 21. I am a stealth transgender person at work, talking to someone who I didn't know was transphobic and who knew that I was a little different in my expression. "I think my niece is gay or bisexual or something. How did your parents take it when you told them? I mean, I have lots of gay friends and stuff, but those transgender people just take it too far." That was also super unprofessional for a work conversation. Story 22. Recent acquaintance told me the winds from the recent Los Angeles wildfires were being controlled by someone in the Mojave. Story 23. This very progressive individual I used to work with asked to see a picture of my girlfriend. I showed him, and he said, "She's pretty for a black girl." I was taken aback and asked him what he meant by that. He repeated it again and claimed it was a compliment. My coworkers heard and gave him a concerned look. I told him that was really racist, and he argued it was not because he called her pretty. Story 24. 1. My mother found out when I was 17, after years of my siblings trying to tell me she was a morphine, heroin, and benzodiazepine addict. I confronted her after catching her using drugs in my rental bathroom while she was visiting. She denied it with a needle in her arm. 10 years later, my sisters met her at a bakery on neutral ground to try to rebuild our relationship. They asked her to admit it, and she flew off the handle. I haven't seen her in 17 years. My father. I had a lovely stepmother who was very caring and a mother to my younger half-brother and half-sister. My dad and her split, and 6 months later, she died in a fatal crash on Mother's Day. I remember 10 years ago him dancing in the kitchen, in full view and hearing of my younger siblings, celebrating that she was not around anymore. His words, "I am 36. Both parents are alive, but I have no parents in my eyes. My older brother Ross, the list is too long and despicable to mention. But needless to say, my 3 sisters and younger brother and I are all very kind and compassionate people. After experiencing that, we use them as examples of roads to never walk down, and we are a very loving, tight-knit family now." Story 25. Women should not wear skirts or tops that reveal their shoulders. It gives men the irresistible temptation to act inappropriately toward them. This was a casual conversation with my driver. I automatically rated him 1 star after that comment and left a negative review. Story 26. My sister claimed that newborn babies can breathe underwater. She is a nurse. I think she was getting confused about the dive reflex, where babies instinctively know not to breathe in underwater. It was such a foolish thing to say that I was kind of speechless. When I pushed back, she was incredibly indignant and got angry. In my head, I was thinking, "Oh, you were actually misguided," and I just dropped it. It really made me reevaluate her, though. Story 27. Had minimal respect for an employee, but when he called someone a smart aleck dimwit, it initially blew me away. In time, I adopted this as one of my favorite insults. Story 28. Dated a woman right before the pandemic. Also got along great with her young adult children. She begged me to move into her house for months, and I finally agreed. A couple of months later, she was on an overnight trip to the capital. We were politically active, and I received a call from her oldest daughter. "Mom is cheating on you," and I refused to lie for her. She came home the next morning, looking pretty tired. I told her I found out some other way. I didn't want to throw her daughter under the bus, and demanded to know why she did it. We had a great relationship. She said, "I had to know what it was like to feel a man that big." She then started describing its girth as thicker than her wrist. I started packing a bag. Then she began crying and making a scene, saying the guy assaulted her that morning, and it was awful, and she just needs to be held. I called her daughter and said, "Come over and hold your mother. She is upset because she was with a pharmacist who was well endowed." Her other daughter helped me pack the rest of my belongings when I came back to get them a week later. Story 29. Coworker asked me what my favorite football team was. I told him the Raiders. His response was, "But you're not Mexican." Story 30. My dad was generally pretty abusive and racist and said lots of horrible things, but the worst to me was when he defended the murder of Emmett Till. I have heard all kinds of crazy racism, and to some degree I understand why people want to lie to themselves about contemporary stories like George Floyd or Trayvon Martin, but this was a little boy and it happened in the 1950s. Why go so hard defending it? Story 31. A former acquaintance, really in the gray area between acquaintance and friend, but I definitely didn't know him that well to have anticipated or avoided what's to follow, who was a fair bit older than me, admitted a little over a decade ago that he was trying to become more intellectual. He was trying to learn how to debate and to think more deeply about political matters and present his points. He was, in essence, trying to better himself because he just wasn't articulate or knowledgeable in these things. I didn't genuinely have any idea this mattered to him, but I encouraged him. How did he plan on improving himself? He selected a social media group to learn from. Yes, it was a cesspool with a pretty strong and particular political leaning. He convinced me to join with him, and I did, skeptically but trying to be supportive, and that lasted until I had pretty definitive proof that the most respected members of the group were complete idiots and manipulators. I didn't really talk to the acquaintance much in the following years, just some back and forth on social media here and there, mainly political stuff. It was becoming apparent that we didn't share political viewpoints, though he did keep it civil and was always open to discussion, and it seemed like he was a bit open-minded, but maybe just trying to figure out where he fell on certain issues. My one big political issue is universal healthcare, and I was quite invested in it, and still am for that matter, though I don't engage in debate anymore, especially not on social media, but at this time I still did. He had apparently figured out where he fell on this matter and raised the point to me that the United States had the most medical innovation because of capitalism, pointing to citation rates by country. Ignoring the question of what actually constitutes medical advances in his opinion, I noted that population was a much stronger indicator than capitalism in this case. His response, "Nice try," and he attempted to sweep it under the rug. The rest of what he said was forgotten to me. The words "nice try" and the presumption of being right, dripping with misplaced overconfidence, were all that stuck after the moment had passed. I was admittedly stunned by his inability to realize the basis of his argument was flawed. He didn't know that while it hinged on capitalism as the cause, he couldn't reasonably separate it from the stronger indicator of population, which was the only path forward for him to maintain his point. It also never occurred to me that after a few years of engaging in debate with that one group of individuals on social media, his opinion of himself would go to his head. I am, by the way, perfectly willing to be wrong and would like to be proven wrong because I will change my viewpoint in light of strong evidence because I'm not an idiot. Had he pulled an ace from his sleeve strong enough to undo everything I knew about the topic, given enough time to process and verify, I would have certainly changed my position. Suffice it to say, "nice try" doesn't come remotely close to changing my mind. It just made me lose all respect for him. I am most certainly leaving out context that I'm forgetting. This was something like 6 years ago, but the words "nice try" might as well be tattooed on his forehead. I had to cut off all contact because I had zero respect for him and how big his ego had undeservingly become, and I wouldn't be able to fake it either since he was definitely going to continue pushing his uninformed and entrenched opinions as political debate in the future. I've kept quiet about this all this time, so this is more of a true off my chest for me. But yes, "nice try" were the ridiculous words that made me lose all respect for someone I previously held in good regard. Story 32. There's a regular at my job who I thought was nice and funny until she seriously told me she is a teacher, and she thanks God that she does not teach at one of those schools that mutilates children. Story 33. I guess there is not much point in learning Latin because it is a dead language. Well, except in Latin America, of course. Story 34. I had someone tell me I shouldn't have rights while trying to convince me to be with him. The foolishness can really make the jaw drop. Story 35. 9/11 was an inside job. Not long after, I ended a 30-year friendship with the guy. I could not believe someone I truly loved and respected could have gone down that rabbit hole. Story 36. A woman said to me, "I understand boys better than you do because I have 2 sons and you do not. I am a man. Story 37. I had a work colleague confidently explain to everyone in the break room that more than half of all biomass on Earth is dedicated to the most common forms of livestock: chickens, pigs, cows, goats, and sheep. This is obviously completely nonsensical, and the thought itself falls apart with even a basic understanding of how energy works. Suffice it to say that I did not listen much to anything he said after that. Story 38. I was 11 when my dad suddenly passed away. My aunt, my mother's sister, was trying to console me by saying that it is better for him to be dead than divorced from my mother, like her grandchildren's parents are, because having your dad living away somehow is worse than him being dead. Story 39. A family member once told me they would be upset if they died before they got to spend their assumed inheritance from their parent. Guess what happened? Story 40. When my husband told me that the reason he can remember things, get things done, and seem to care at his job but cannot do any of these things at home is because he earns money at his job. There is no coming back from that. As always, he withdraws later, saying he did not mean it like that. But I know he does. He lies and he shows no regard for my feelings. An apology is really invalid if the actions just keep occurring again and again. Story 41. A coworker attempted to explain that Musk was not, in fact, Sieg Heiling but was just expressing his emotions to the audience. Story 42. Are you sure that you do not want a white baby? This was said to me, a person with interracial parents and a non-white husband. They quickly backed away after I stared at them in disgust. Story 43. My best friend told me she would have to end our friendship if I couldn't stop singing, "I'm a Believer." I thought she was joking, but then I saw her face. Story 44. My ex once asked me if my school had a pit for the long jump. He went to private school, which was an excellent waste of money in his case, and I went to a school he considered to be less affluent based on his ridiculous self-importance. I told him we weren't too poor for sand, and he clarified he didn't mean a sand pit for playing. Story 45. That you could be pregnant and continue menstruating for the duration of the pregnancy as part of a healthy, low-risk pregnancy. Story 46. My uncle told me he wanted to die before his ailing mother so he did not have to deal with her death. A week or two later, we got the call that he had passed. That conversation still haunts me to this day. Story 47. I had no choice. I already did not respect my girlfriend's mother for choosing money and abuse over her, but that made me call her out on it. Story 48. I have been struggling with helping a child who was moved into my class. The school psychologist, in an official document, stated that she provided me with multiple resources to assist, but she did not. I am being formally reprimanded for not providing support. Story 49. My cousin said that Bill Gates developed COVID so he could implant microchips into everyone to track them. The same cousin only pays by mobile phone, puts everything she does on social media, and will post 40 selfies a day. But she thinks Bill Gates needs a microchip and COVID to track her. Story 50. Your autism must have been caused by childhood vaccinations. Please, if anything, autism causes vaccines because a lot of scientific researchers are on the spectrum. Story 51. Last year, my best friend of over 2 decades told me, I kind of agree with Trump. To this day, I still can't get that moment out of my mind every time we chat. Story 52. Not said, but done. His family had a pet bunny that had never been in the wild. The children did not show much interest in it, and instead of trying to find it a new home, he just released it into the wilderness. It was probably dead by the first week, considering all the coyotes in the area. He was also a narcissist, always believed he was right, could dish it out but would become angry if you retaliated. He claimed to be a Christian, but he was the most unpleasant, mean, and immature person I have ever encountered. He exhibited low emotional intelligence and lived by a good old boy mentality, where life is just a series of, I got mine. I am glad I no longer have to work with him. Story 53. I was complaining to the developer of our brand new unit that they hadn't installed the windows correctly. I could take a lighter, and the flame would fully blow sideways at the window. The contractor was with us when he told me that's how clouds were made. I kicked him out of my apartment. Story 54. The absolute dumbest thing I ever heard was from my social worker friend who worked part-time at the local prison. She was setting up a support group for all the arrested individuals who were being bullied in jail. She was really worried for them. I told her to never talk to me about it again or we couldn't be friends. Story 55. I cannot control who falls in love with me. This was said by my former best friend when she was being defensive about her micro-cheating on her boyfriend of more than 5 years. Story 56. My former friend became upset when I shared with her that I started medication for a short time to address a hormone imbalance. She has 2 children and needed hormone injections to support both pregnancies. I have not interacted with her since then. Story 57. Someone told me that it was possible to meditate cancer away while my husband, then fiancé, was undergoing chemotherapy for stage 3 non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. Story 58. This was over 20 years ago. He was 18 and told me how, when he was 16, he was in the Walmart in San Antonio, ran into one of the Spice Girls in the electronics department. She took him to their tour bus in the parking lot, where they all had intimate relations with him in a Spice Girl gathering. This was the story he shared as he was moving into the dorm building. He told me first, then he repeated it to a friend of mine who didn't believe me when I relayed what I had been told. We laughed and knew that he would never again tell us the truth. And we were right. Story 59. I am so glad you are not going to the holiday destination so you can house sit for us. I was invited on this holiday but did not get my passport in time. I also did not end up house sitting for them either. Story 60. I saw a guy at a party that I matched with on Tinder. I remembered why we never made it to a date when he started talking about the Joker being the best and most intelligent villain and how similar they are. Story 61. This person was about to buy a house and said, "Yes, the government should give us some money to pay off this loan. A mortgage is something you need to pay, but you have nothing in exchange. Well, Karen, you have a house because of the mortgage." Story 62. I started speaking to a guy I had a crush on for years, and we were both single. He claims to have liked me also for some time, and you know how this goes. Anyway, he picks me up, and we have a smoke in his car. He then drops this bombshell. I still live with my ex, and sometimes we kiss and sleep together. High as I was, I said, "Drive me home." I never said anything else to him other than, "Dude, that's just not okay." I have never spoken to him since. Story 63. You know, in winter when your nose starts hurting because of the cold air? A girl I knew said it was because of the oxygen getting in your nose. I honestly hope for her sake that she was being sarcastic. Story 64. I will bet we could stop illegal immigration if we shot 3 of them. This was said about a month after this same person stated that killing someone is never the answer in reference to the United Healthcare Chief Executive Officer being shot. Story 65. Shouting trans people are from Transylvania multiple times at the top of her lungs. Also, a few days after I had started that job, she came up to me and said, "You're not a rainbow shooter, are you?" This was my assistant manager at a job where I was ready to be publicly out, and the Google result for the business says, LGBTQ+ friendly. She also regularly mocked the 2 transgender women who shopped at the store, and said if she ever had a child that decided they were transgender one day, she would immediately disown them and boot them out of her house. This while also complaining and being sad because she had difficulties trying to get pregnant. A nasty piece of work, both as a person and as a manager. I hate Texas so much. Edit, about my main manager at that same job. I had injured my wrist while stacking pallets one day. They regularly left all of their work for me because I actually have a work ethic unlike them, and I wasn't able to do a lot of the heavy lifting as easily. Not to mention they were always fully aware of an old back injury I had. They left an entire 10 full pallets for me to stack off and get rid of while also having to do regular closing duties and trying to keep up with the sales floor. I worked alone at night, typically 9 hours by myself, not counting an hour for lunch. Since I couldn't lift the pallets without possibly injuring myself further, I lifted them with one arm onto their sides and lined them up together after managing to actually work everything off the pallets in time. The next day, that manager blew up on me, saying, "What was that with the pallets?" I explained that they literally left the entire truck for me, showed him my arm, and told him how I was trying to let my arm heal and didn't want to injure it more. He then said, "Well, if you can't use an arm, then what good are you? Walking out after I found a much better and more amazing job where everyone treats me like a human being never felt so good. Goodbye, Fred and Brittany. And goodbye, Albertsons. Story 66. Not to me, but I overheard after I left the room. My boss said I was dramatic and annoying. After that, I stopped helping her and began using phrases like, "Oh, I'm not sure," or "Oh, I don't know." Story 67. I know that I have hurt you more than I could ever make up for, but you are not the man I want to spend the rest of my life with. Story 68. Shortly after his wife had given birth to their second child, he complained about how many documents they had to sign at the hospital before they were allowed to leave without vaccinations. Story 69. Stop using big words, my former boss said. It's what happens when you read books, you know. Ever since I started reading as a kid, I had a dictionary to look up words that were new to me. Story 70. Mom looked me dead in the eye and said she would rather have me smoke cigarettes and drink alcohol than smoke marijuana. Story 71. I know it is a bit of a controversial topic, but here it goes. A friend and I were talking when the matter shifted to the current situation in Gaza, and I told her outright that what the nation of Israel is doing is wrong. She asked me why, and I provided her with several important points, such as the killing of innocent civilians and the idea that you do not get to go to someone's house and demand their house keys. She looked me in the eyes and told me the only reason I support Palestine is because I am a Muslim, and that since Israel is mentioned in the Bible, it is older than Palestine. I could not stop myself from telling her that her education is a waste. Story 72. Someone who was a friend of a friend once said no one liked me at primary school. I was only at the same primary school as them for 6 months when I was 7. I was 30 when they said this. Story 73. I was talking to my brother's uncle. He's kind of smart and has some pretty out there theories, but he said he is not a conspiracy theorist. I joked and said, "So at least you don't believe the earth is flat." He then looked right at me and said, "Well, there is no way to prove it is round." I completely disengaged from our conversation after that. Story 74. My mother recently came up with the most outrageous conspiracy about Jacinda and Clark. My inner voice was saying that she calls you the derogatory term for having complex post-traumatic stress disorder. It was at that moment I broke free of her shackles. However, I have no respect for her thought processes as she gets older. Story 75. He had mismatched tires on his Bronco and said he was going to lower it because it drove funny. He was a neighborhood mechanic. I told him we could not be friends anymore. Story 76. But she's family, and family is everything, says the mom of the person whose almost son went to jail for being falsely accused of a serious crime. She defended the one who wanted him to take the fall, so she wouldn't get into trouble for lying. Adriana, if you see this, I still don't care about what is happening to you. By all means, do it. Story 77. I had a client with dementia, experiencing moderate progression but still mobile. Occasionally, approximately once a week, they were incontinent of feces, which was never fun but not exactly a significant issue. The next of kin wanted them to have a colostomy. I explained that it was major, life-altering surgery, and that there was no way this poor, confused person would benefit. That is not your decision to make. Story 78. God said to honor your mother and father and do what they say, so if you go against my will, then you are going against God's will. Basically, this is one of many examples of how my father tried to reason that his will and demands were equivalent to that of God's. It was really bad. Religious abuse is challenging. Story 79. My ex-friend started her part-time job next door to where I work. Soon after starting, the owner put up a for sale sign, and this friend, whom I will call Z, started talking to her dad about buying the store for one reason only: to get more money. Bear in mind she had only been working there for about 3 months at this point. Also, she had no idea how to run a business. She just thought it would be cool to own a business at 20. I instantly lost respect for her because she was making no effort to actually save money. She was wasting it every week when she went out drinking or smoking with other friends. Story 80. It was a guy from work and we were working in a foreign country. He said he has a girlfriend in our country and that he likes to party. He basically confessed that he cheats on his girlfriend. I asked him what she did to deserve this. He said nothing, but he doesn't think it's something bad because she doesn't know. At that moment, I lost all my respect for that guy, and I didn't talk to him anymore. I don't know his girlfriend, so there was no way I could tell her. I am so sorry for her. And I was so shocked he talked about it like it was nothing. Story 81. One of my friend's friends tried to tell me that the reason a Category 5 cyclone was approaching my home in Cairns was that the lizardmen aliens, who were trying to xenoform Earth, were at war with the white guy aliens, who had set up a secret military base in crystal caverns below the Great Dividing Range. My personal theory is that he found his life too boring and himself too average, so he latched onto things like that. 1, to make his life feel more exciting, and 2, to make himself feel more special than the rest of us because he knew secret knowledge. Story 82. I love that pigeon as a man loves a woman. Nikola Tesla. It's a quote that was conveniently posted right above this post. Story 83. A former friend and I were trying to figure out what to do on a Friday evening, when he suggested that we pick up one of our lady friends, drive very far out and tell them, "Have sex with us or we'll make you walk home." This was before ride-sharing services. I told him no, we're not doing that, and looked at him as if he was crazy because he was. He then tried to tell me he was just joking around, but I don't think he was. I haven't talked to him since that day. But that's when I realized the type of challenges women have to deal with. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.